Well, welcome, and thank you for joining this webinar on the Inclusive Futures Capital Grant Program. I'm Teresa Jordan, the Director of the Children's Investment Fund, and we are a nonprofit based in Boston that provides financing, training, and technical assistance to early childhood education and out-of-school time providers that are making improvements to their facilities. We know that your days are busy and long, and we so appreciate you taking the time to join this session. So thanks for all that you do and for being interested in this grant program. Just a few logistical notes before we get started. We are recording this session and we will post it to our website afterwards. So for anyone who was not able to make it, we will also send out an email after the session to all of you with a copy of the slides and a link to the recording and any other additional materials. And towards the end of this presentation, we will have a live question and answer period. So please, send us your questions by using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. And we will try to answer as many questions as possible. And with that, I will turn it over to my colleague, Kira Wilkie.
Great, thanks, Teresa. So again, welcome. I'm Kira Wilkie. I'm Associate Director of Development at Children's Investment Fund. And today we're going to go over an overview of the grant program. We're going to talk about eligibility, talk through funding categories, and show some photos of examples, review some key dates and the application process, and then move to the Q&A. So please do type in your questions using the Q&A button as we go along, but we'll save all the questions for the second half of the hour and try to answer as many as we can. So for the overview, we just really want to say that we're grateful for the generosity of the Liberty Mutual Foundation, who has made this program possible. We are going to be awarding capital grants focused on accessibility. So when we talk about capital grants, those are really physical improvements to your buildings and your site. So funding cannot be used for operations or anything like that. And when we say accessibility, we really mean to ensure that your center can be easily used by people with disabilities, which can be physical or mental, and everyone else. So that includes all the children you serve, their parents and caregivers, and the staff who work in your centers. The grant amount is between $50,000 and $100,000 per site. And we do plan on running 2 rounds, one this spring and one next spring as well. So we're excited to be able to run 2 rounds. And just a note for those of you who may be familiar with the EEOST Capital Fund, the state funded fund, this is completely separate from that. In fact, there are some key differences. We've really tried to simplify the process. There won't be a legal closing for the grant like we do for EEOST. We're also able to be in close contact with you throughout the whole process, even leading up to the application deadline. We see this as a very collaborative process together. So that's kind of, we're not able to do that necessarily with the state funding because of procurement guidelines. And just to review eligibility, you must be a nonprofit 501c3. You must be center-based. So just a note that family childcare providers are not eligible for this funding, unfortunately, and neither are for-profit centers. You must be EEC licensed, located in the city of Boston, and it's really the city of Boston proper. The neighborhoods are listed in the RFP that we have posted. You must provide early childhood education care and or out of school time programming, and it must be year round. So if you only provide out of school time care, you must have summer programming as well. And we are targeting centers that serve low-income children. And so for that, we mean at least 25% of your enrollment right now is comprised of children with EEC subsidy or vouchers or in a Head Start slot. And the date that we have in the application is April 29th this month or later. So you could pick May 1st if that's easier, or May 10th. But that is what current enrollment means in this context. And then you must own your site or have a lease term of at least 5 years. And that's 5 years starting from when we wish to award the grants this summer. So it's really a lease term through August of 2027. That would be the term that we'd be looking for to make sure that the improvements that you're making will, last at least that long and hopefully much longer. So now I just want to introduce our team a bit. From the Children's Investment Fund, the review team working on this project specifically will be Teresa, who you just met, and myself, and Alicia Tony, who's actually a newest member of our team. And I would just invite her to turn on her video and just say hello to you all.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Alicia. And she has much experience as a construction project manager, working on a variety of projects. And I also want to note that Bree Horowitz is here. Many of you know her. She's very much a part of our team. She won't be reviewing applications more specifically for this project, but she's going to help us moderate the Q&A at the end of the session and very much involved. So if Bree, you want to say hi.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Bree. And then we have a group of very talented consultants that we're really happy to be working with. So I'll have them introduce themselves, and if you could just say anything about your firm and your expertise, sort of your role within this grant program, that would be great. So we'll start with Josh.
Hi, everyone. My name is Josh Safty. I use he, him pronouns. I am the managing principal at KMA, which is a design and consulting firm working at the intersection of architecture and accessibility. And I am helping the team, particularly with the nitty-gritty of both compliance with accessibility requirements and then best practices in approaching inclusive design.
Great. Thanks, Josh. And then next is Amanyona.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Amanyona Bosman. I'm the owner of Bosman Construction Management Incorporated, a woman-owned business. I have over 20 years experience in the construction industry, and I'm really excited to help every one of you, if possible, supervise your construction, help you with going through the process and kind of like vetting out the contractors that you all will be selecting and helping to review and understand what construction is all about and getting the best for your grant funds.
Thank you. And then Shara.
Hi, Shara Lewis. I'm principal at Shara Lewis Associates. I'm an owner's project manager also. I will be helping you helping review the grants as they come in, and then helping to administer the grants, making sure that we can pay you back, that you've got everything that you need in order to get reimbursed by the fund.
Wonderful. Thanks so much. And so, as I mentioned before, we're really excited just to have this be a collaborative process with you, and excited to have the expertise working along with us. So we'll just run through the funding categories that we had laid out in the RFP. Just a few notes. We do encourage you to think very broadly about accessibility using a concept called universal design, which is really about creating environments that can be used and enjoyed by all children, regardless of their ability. And so again, we encourage you to think about the many individuals that are coming into your building and your site, families, caregivers, as well as staff who you support. And there are some features of accessibility that are very strictly defined under the Americans with Disabilities Act, or the ADA. So many of you might be familiar with that acronym, but just in case we bring that up, those are really the very specific guidelines of ADA compliance and accessibility. So the first category of the funding that we can support is outdoor play space renovation. And so we just wanted to kind of talk through some examples. Every space is different, but here's an early education and out of school time program in Worcester that we helped with that renovated their play space a few years ago. You'll see that they built a long ramp to this space leading from the back entrance of the building to the play space that's on the right. So think about how your play space is situated right now and how someone reaches the space. Is there an accessible route to the actual space itself? And another thing that we wanted to point out is the rubberized surfacing around the space, creating a pathway so that an individual with a physical mobility challenge could travel around the grassy space to reach other parts of the play space. This is just another picture of a ramp, which is actually sort of part of the play structure and used to access features of the play structure. This is an early education program in Boston. You can see the paved pathways again, kind of around and through the space to give access. And they also have raised garden beds. So that's kind of a nice natural feature that you could think about. And so, you know, we encourage a variety of activities that children can do, including natural features or, you know, activities like gardening, and not just focusing on the traditional play structures and making those play structures accessible, which is also fine, but, you know, thinking about different activities in your space that you could promote. Here's a picture of a water feature at a Boston program. And so again, you know, it could easily engage a child that has some mobility challenges because, you know, it has the space to do that, but also just for any child who enjoys the sensory experience of water, finds it soothing, and has something different than just climbing a play structure to do. This is a hammock used at an early education medically therapeutic program, actually, that was run by Boston Medical Center. And they said they used this hammock a lot. You'll see in the picture a staff person doing some therapy with this child, and she's able just to lay there and relax and look up at the sky and the trees. So it's sort of a calming space and feature that may or may not, you know, work for your center, but something that they really loved and enjoyed. Here's an example of an adaptive swing that allows a child who may have difficulty sitting in a certain way to lay down and to get a different sensory experience. And also for any kids of any ability to be able just to have a different type of swing than is traditionally thought of. And then there's so much equipment out there. This is just one example of a sort of merry-go-round type spinner that's at a height so that a child can transfer from a wheelchair if needed into the spinner. A variety of number of kids can be in there and sit while kids are kind of spinning them and turning them around. You know, just a note that the bottom photo would be much better if the surfacing wasn't loose wood chips. I mean, if they were really thinking about accessibility, that's not the best choice necessarily. But something like this, you know, it looks like it costs $8,000 to $10,000, but just a reminder that there are so many other factors with outdoor play space equipment. You know, there's the surfacing, as we just mentioned, installation, delivery, like what's the overall plan for the space? So it's not just about costing out equipment, it's about thinking about those other features, which is why we encourage the use of a design professional and architect, which we'll talk about later. And I just want to pause here for a minute just to see if our resident expert architect, Josh, if you had anything to add about any of these slides or any other kind of thoughts or tips about outdoor play space.
Thanks, Kira. I think one of the things that I would stress for everybody listening is that, you know, we often think of trying to accommodate children with sensory, physical, or cognitive disabilities, but just as important is, you know, the opportunity to make life work better for their guardians, their caretakers, their parents, their younger siblings, right? You know, there's disability doesn't discriminate, right? Anybody who interacts with your facility could be a person with a disability. And so some of the features that we're looking at, you know, like the path around the perimeter of the entire of the entire playground, which is a state requirement here in Massachusetts, can be as much for caretakers and family members as it is for children themselves.
Great. Yeah, thanks for making that point. Next is exterior building access and circulation. So just take a minute to think about your entrance at your site right now. Can individuals get into your building without the use of stairs? And, again, this is not only useful to any individuals with a physical challenge, but also to parents with strollers, staff with mobility challenges. And so for ramps, there are specific dimensions, guidelines about the slope of the ramp and other features that make it an accessible ramp. So it's just another reason to engage with a design professional early on, just to make sure that you have the space to do it and that there aren't any other things that you should be thinking about for your space in particular. And this is a program in Lynn that just shows, to think about parking. Do you have parking? What's the actual route? Maybe you don't have space for parking. Maybe it's from the sidewalk, from public transportation, but what's the route that an individual would travel to get to the front entrance? And so you'll see here, once someone gets out of a car, there's a curb cut there and a level pathway to the door. So just kind of thinking about how individuals come from different vantage points of your building. And Josh, if you have anything to add, please do for this section. It's okay if not as well.
Maybe I'll wait, Kira. I mean, I think
Yeah.
you're getting to another important piece of it, but yeah, I'll hold off from
Sure.
there.
Yeah. The next category is interior access and circulation. So once people get into your space, this is could be interior or external, but we would support, automatic door openers. Once people are inside, are there a bunch of stairs or is everything accessible sort of inside the building to classrooms and to other spaces? In terms of elevators, maybe you have an old elevator that needs to be repaired. New elevators can be pretty expensive, depending on structurally sort of what's going on with your building and your interior. And even if you're doing repairs, we would recommend that you consult with an architect or someone that knows the ADA guidelines and the code, because even if it seems like a somewhat straightforward repair, codes have changed in the last 20, 30 years. So we would just want to make sure that it continues to be up to code. And Massachusetts licensed mechanics have to install this equipment, and inspections should be done by a Massachusetts licensed elevator inspector. So you just have to be a little bit careful about making sure that everything will be in compliance. And maybe an elevator does not make sense. This is an example of a lift. So there are some other lift options. Again, a design professional and an architect would be able to come out and see your space and just advise you on what might work best. Anything else to note, Josh, for any of these topics?
I guess the question of I guess I would just underscore the importance of having a design professional, involved in the process, and whether it's, understanding better the degree of compliance your existing space actually has, or making sure that, when you start to develop solutions, that they're actually going to serve the, the need that you're hoping that they're going to serve. The accessibility codes and standards, in Massachusetts and, truthfully around the country are unfortunately complicated and can be confusing. And so, this is what our firm does on a daily basis. We'll be serving in a different way, helping Children's Investment Fund, but there are other architects out there who, specifically and landscape architects for that matter, who understand the ins and outs of the codes and the sort of triggers that can come up when you're doing another project in your building, for example. So, the accessibility work in a building usually gets a bad name when no one knew they had to do it, and it's only when we're well into the project that suddenly someone finds out I have to do a ramp or I have to renovate a bathroom or that kind of thing. It really can make for a much better space overall, but the key to it is having it integrated into the beginning of a project and not sort of a surprise toward the end. And having a design professional be part of the project from the beginning is the best way to make sure it goes the way you want it to.
Great point. And we'll talk about that in a little bit in terms of folks that we can recommend and how that might all work. But just a few other examples, we would fund bathroom improvements for accessibility. Here are just some photos of some bathrooms that we have worked on. This is an early education center in Chicopee. You can see there's the signage there. There's the accessible sort of stall area, which is larger and has the grab bars. There needs to be a certain turning radius and some other dimensions for that. And here's another example of an accessible bathroom. And then if you're an out of school time provider, you may have stalls. And again, not only must there be certain dimensions and features within the bathroom, but even just the door to the bathroom should be a certain width and should have enough space. We would support things like touchless faucets and other fixtures. So again, this is an area where a design professional could really come take a look and help advise you. And then the last category, we do want to prioritize more like sort of permanent built environment features to your space, but we do recognize that you may need some furnishings and equipment as well. We wouldn't necessarily find a proposal that's all furnishings equipment to be very competitive, but you may have a need for varied seating within the classroom to make certain areas, or more specialized seating like the chair on the left for children that may need positioning help. Individual materials like curriculum or technology or books are not eligible, but the furnishings sort of category would be eligible. And this is a feature that we do like and see a lot and find helpful, is a sort of cozy retreat area or a nook, just to help with emotional regulation, really for any child, but just thinking about in your classroom how you can carve out space for things like that. Great, so we'll keep going. I'm just going to do a time check. We have a few more slides and we really want to open it up for questions. Please do put your questions in. We did create an accessibility checklist that we just put on the grant page, and we'll share the link again with everyone. This is really just to spark some ideas for you. It's an informal guide. It's not meant to have everything related to accessibility, but it's something that might just lead you to think about some things in your space and your site and things you could ask an architect about. It's not meant to be submitted with the application. You're not going to necessarily share it with us, but it's an informal guide for you to start thinking about some of this. And then, as we've talked about, so here's really what we see as the best practice for capital project planning. And we know these are smaller grants. We're not expecting folks to apply for a huge, $1 million project. Like this really is meant to be small-ish size capital improvements that will help enhance the accessibility of your space. But as we talked about, we do encourage you to engage with a design professional and architect now, early on, to really come out and take a look at your space. We have a list on our website. I'll show you again the website in a minute. We just updated it to add some landscape and outdoor play space designers to people that have that specific specialty. Some people will come out to visit your space even just for free or for a nominal hourly rate. Any expenses that you incur to work with a design professional can be included in your proposed budget. So essentially, if you were funded with the grant, you would be reimbursed for those costs. And we do encourage you to reach out to a few people to see who responds, based on their workload and who also you have a feel for you would like to work with. Your design professional can help you draft a conceptual plan, which is sometimes called a schematic plan as well, based on what your thinking is. And this will help us in our review of your grant proposal, as well as help you really gather a more detailed cost estimate and really hone in on what you want to do. Then after you've done that, you will begin to gather some cost estimates. We realize it can be hard to get contractors to come out to your space, but it really is necessary. I mean, it helps us and you gauge whether what you're proposing is really feasible given the grant size. And then the budget that you'll submit with the application should correspond to these costs that you have gathered. And again, it's just about doing the best you can to get really honed in costs and see what's feasible within that $50,000 to $100,000 range. We realize that the timing is condensed in some ways. We are offering what we're calling office hour feedback sessions next week and the week after. There's a sign up link that's linked here, but you won't be able to click on it through this, but we will send it out through the follow-up email. So you just fill in a quick online form to tell us which times might be available. We'll schedule 20-minute conversations with you and your team. So it'll be our review team and then whoever you can invite on your end so that we can offer some initial feedback and kind of problem solve together and learn about what you're thinking. And then the application deadline is May 18th at 4 p.m. We will conduct in-person visits for selected applicants in June, pending COVID safety. I mean, we want to work with you to see, what protocols we can follow and want to make sure the safety of everyone involved. And then we hope to award grants by July 29th. And so I'm just going to, let's see if this will open. This is our web page, which you have seen probably. But here are the documents, the request for proposals, the application form, which I'll click on in a minute. This is a list of design professionals and the checklist that I mentioned. So the form will open up in Word and you will use this. You can use it to just prepare your answers for the application that you will, though, eventually submit online. So this is kind of your prep document. Hopefully it opens. And then this is the link for actually sort of putting in your answers online. And I would really recommend you do it a couple days before the deadline in case there are any challenges. Please reach out with any questions. My name and number is there. So these are the eligibility questions just for your reference. This organizational information you can prep here by typing it in, but you will actually enter these in online. And it's, where your proposed site is, how much you would request. And then this is the narrative sort of section. So you would type in, for each section, your answers. We totally support brevity. You don't need to write a lot, a few, sentences as needed for each. And then you kind of would resave this document as a Word document and upload it online as your narrative section, and it'll prompt you for that. This is sort of our budget format, and you can add lines to this and put in what you need to. And this is our enrollment chart that perhaps many of you have seen. This is a bit tricky because you have to double click and it's a bit finicky. As you can see, you have to wait a minute. I think maybe I have to enable editing. to be able to input the numbers. It might not let me do it right now. And then it lists all the attachments that you will need. The tricky thing is the online software that we're using does not support Excel, unfortunately. So things like your operating budget or your balance sheet, you'll have to put into PDF format. It just may take an extra step. So we apologize for that, but let us know if you have any challenges. And so we do ask for cost estimates, at least one. If you're able to collect 2 or 3, that's really best practice. And the conceptual plans or specs created by a design professional as well. So let's see. The other thing I just wanted to pull up is the list of design professionals. You do not have to use these folks, but they are firms that we have worked with. Some of these folks do have expertise in outdoor play space and landscape architecture, but we did list people that are really honed into that at the end. And we are adding more, actually. We're having individual conversations with people so that they know about this grant in particular, and we'll know when people are reaching out what it's for. Okay, a few more slides and we'll get to the questions. Scoring, these are the categories in which we will view these grant applications, the impact of the modification on the accessibility of your site. If you are able to well document the costs by getting a realistic view of what you want to do and cost estimates, how feasible is your project? We're asking that projects would be completed by April 2023. And project readiness is sort of similar to that. How ready are you to move forward if you were awarded? Your organizational capacity, is there a point person that you've identified who can work on this project, and or consultants that you have connected with to give you the capacity to do that? The financial stability of your organization, this is really just a high level look. We're just asking for a year of audits. We know that early education and out of school time does not have large profit margins. It's by no way are we looking at it in that way, but are just looking at kind of high level stability. And then we are giving preference points to those that serve more than half of their enrollment for children with low income, those that are addressing outdoor space, because it is something that we are promoting. We do want to promote engagement with minority business enterprise firms. And so that's MBEs. And that could be for a contractor or vendor that you work with, could be a consultant like a design professional or someone else that you brought on. You don't have to necessarily go with someone like a vendor, but as long as you are engaging with an MBE to get a cost estimate, that would qualify. And I'll talk about that in the next slide. And then we are giving preference for applicant organizations that are led by people of color. And so for MBE engagement, there are some directories, the State Supplier Diversity Office, and these are linked, which you'll get in the email, the City of Boston, and actually a housing partner that we work with has compiled a list, and it's broken down by specialty. So it shows general contractors, electricians, and so forth. And so you can look at those lists. You can please reach out to if you would like some help with this or would like any specific guidance on this. And there is a process to be certified as an MBE that's kind of extensive. So folks don't actually need to be officially certified. They can be self-identified. We don't want to limit it to those that have gone through that process. So that is it for the slides. We can move now to the Q&A. We have time, so we really would love to hear from you. If you want to put some more questions in, I'm going to stop sharing, and the review team, all of us could put, could sort of be on screen now, but that was kind of a lot of information, but Bree, are there questions we can start off with?
Sure, I will start with some eligibility questions. The first question is there any flexibility with the lease in terms of being in the location over 10 years and the lease is renewed every 3 years? Can a landlord sign something saying that we'll be there for at least the next 5 years?
So yes, I would say we can be flexible, and that means I would, I think Teresa, you probably have more experience with leases in that way, but if it's kind of clear and written in that it's automatically renewed, it depends kind of who can terminate or how it's written. So I would just say, if you could reach out to us, we could take a look and see whether we would want anything further in terms of documentation.
Agreed. Yes, I think that we just need to understand sort of what the timing is now, where you are in the lease, and the timing of our grant, and whether that would, if you're, you have 2 more years on the lease and you get another 3 years, then that would be the 5 years. But we would just want to understand it a little bit more. So we would certainly consider the project, but encourage you to contact us to talk more about it. So.
Great. Another eligibility question. Could we apply for 2 separate capital projects that are still within the budget limits?
So yes, in the sense that it should be one site. If you're talking about 2 kind of elements or within the same building or site, and it still kind of fits under the 50,000 to 100,000, then yes. But if it's at different sites or anything like that, that wouldn't be eligible.
Did that answer the question, Bree?
Yes,
is
okay.
to apply for 2 different sites,
Yes.
submit 2 applications for 2 different sites, right? I think we're expecting 1 application for each organization. That's how I'm hearing the
Yes.
question.
Yeah, good to clarify
Right.
too, that if you're a multi-site organization, then you should only apply for 1 application, 1 site. We wouldn't want to see more than 1 application.
Great, thank you. Another general question, and then we'll turn to some specific design and construction questions. This person asks, our program is currently engaged in a bathroom accessibility project with the EEOST grant program. Can funds from the Inclusive Futures grant be used towards consulting costs relating to our EEOST project if the costs have been incurred since January 1st, 2022? Teresa, do you want to?
Yeah, I could
Answer
start
that?
with that
Oh,
too.
okay.
I mean, I think we are thinking of this program as somewhat separate than EEOST, and for projects that would be different than what you would be working on through another funding source. So I would say feel free to sign up for an information session, office hours, and we could talk through it more. But we are seeing these as, sort of somewhat discrete projects that can move on their own and that wouldn't sort of be delayed by a larger capital project, if that makes sense.
Great. Josh, I have a question for you. Can you talk about what doorway and door components and features would be required for an accessible entrance into bathrooms and building entrances?
Sure, I'll start with building entrances. There are requirements for the door and the immediate surrounding, the approach to it and that kind of thing. But it's always important to bear in mind that an accessible entrance can't be accessible if it doesn't have an accessible route leading to it, right? So when we talk about accessible entrances, we really start with how do you arrive at the site, whether it's by car, by public transportation, taxi, Uber, Lyft, et cetera, right? And so the first thing to look for is there an accessible route leading to that door, which generally means a route which doesn't have any stairs or steep slopes, right? And which is a ground surface, which is stable, firm, and slip resistant in the language of the code, right? So typically that's a paved surface or pavers, which are laid flat together. Once you get to a door itself, you'd be looking for a 3-foot leaf on the door, right? A 3-foot wide door, which gives you a clear opening of 32 inches, which is really the minimum width when the door is open. You would be looking for hardware, which could be operated easily with one hand. And so that's a lever kind of handle as opposed to a doorknob that you have to grab and twist. And you would be looking at the threshold as well, right? To make sure that the threshold is low enough that it's easy to roll something over it. All of those are really the same answer for a space like a bathroom, right? It's the same requirement for a clear width, the same requirements for the door hardware. The other factor is something called door maneuvering clearance, which is a little bit complicated to describe verbally over a call, but it's the space on either side of the door that a person needs in order to approach the door hardware, engage it, and then either pull the door open or push it open. And so, as my colleague behind me is demonstrating, actually, so looking for space around the door hardware would be an additional piece of it.
Thank you, Josh. And now I've got a question about construction for Shara. And that's to talk a bit about the permitting and the process that would be required from the city or the municipality if looking to add curb cuts, mobility ramps, or accessible parking to a site.
Yes, so it differs for every site. All these projects, I believe, for this grant are in the city of Boston. So it has to go through city of Boston, and it's important that we have, usually you need a survey of your site, and then you would show existing conditions and proposed conditions. And depending on whether you're on a public or private street, whether you're adding a curb cut, what you're adding if you're adding anything in the setback. So we really do need to look at each case individually, but we can help give you some input on that. But your architect, your landscape architect, ultimately they will be looking at the zoning for your particular site and the requirements. And as I said, we can certainly help advise you in terms of that, but I don't want to go into any specifics because each case is so different, depending on the kind of street you're on and whether there's any other requirements or restrictions on that in that area that you're in.
Thank you. Just a reminder, we can answer your questions live right now, so please feel free to type them into the Q&A. So here's a question about design. Does the project need to be fully conceived at the time of the application, or would it be possible to put in some ideas and then further define the costs later in the process?
That's a good question. What I'll say is that to be more competitive, you would have gone a little bit more beyond just sort of the idea and have engaged a design professional and gotten cost estimates based on their feedback. I think it depends on what you're looking at exactly, but that would be a more competitive grant application than very kind of rough cost estimates. Because of the factors that we've talked about, which is something, going to be ADA accessible? Is it going to trigger something else? You really do need some upfront guidance. And so again, please sign up for the office hour sessions if you want to talk more and sort of get that input as well from us. But there is some upfront work that we realize it will make your application more competitive for this round.
Thank
And
you.
I
Karen.
think I saw, I think Maria raised her hand. Maria, I don't know if you could type in your question though in the Q&A. We could try to answer it.
While Maria is typing, are there other questions?
I guess I would just add one thing about the office hours. If the office hours that we have published don't work for you, we would hope that you could just contact us and, we can set up any time that works better for your schedule, because we'd really love to talk with you about your projects. So just a plug for more information. The more we can give information we can give you to make sure that we're working together on this so that you have a successful application, the better.
Great. So seeing no other questions, I think we will thank you again for joining. Thanks for your time. Know that everything is just very busy at all of your programs. And so we appreciate your partnership. We will send a follow-up email with the links to the office hours with the slides. And we hope to be in touch. Thank you so much.